Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We are going to start the opening of the 11th Annual International Symposium of Foreign Language Learning. May I ask our distinguished guests to turn on the camera during the opening ceremony? Director of Simeo Secretariat, Dr. Ethel Agnes P. Valenzuela, the Director of Confucius Indonesia, Mr. Xiao Xiangzong, the representative of Institut Français Indonésie, Mr. Stephen Dover, the representative of Japan Foundation Indonesia, Mr. Takahashi Yuichi, the representative of Goethe Institute Indonesia, Dr. Steven Dreyer, Director of Simeo Kitab and Language, Dr. Luh Anik Mayani. Our keynote speakers, Associate Professor Chu Zenli Suzanne, Mr. MORITA Mamoru, Professor Dr. Didi Suherdi. All of directors are representatives of Simeo Center in Indonesia. All distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome to the opening ceremony of the 11th Annual International Symposium of Foreign Language Learning, or the 11th AISOFOLL. Ladies and gentlemen, the 11th AISOFOLL would be begun with formalization as follows. First, singing the national anthem of Indonesia, Indonesia Raya, followed by the presentation of Simeo Colors and Simeo Song, Building the Future. Welcome remarks by Director of Simeo Kitab and Language, Dr. Luh Anik Mayani. Opening remarks by Director of Simeo Secretariat, Dr. Ethel Agnes P. Valenzuela. And last but not least, group photo session. Ladies and gentlemen, to start our agenda, we will see the presentation of Indonesia Raya, Simeo Colors, and Simeo Song.
open our eyes to a bright and promising future. We'll rise to the call of the times and create a stronger tomorrow. Let's start to make a difference, teaching everyone to learn. Through science, health, and technology, we will share our expertise. By promoting knowledge and policies, we can build a better world. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and dream. Hear us in below, building the future is our legacy. We'll achieve our goals through partnership, creating opportunities. By working hand in hand, we can accomplish all our dreams. For a better quality of life is now within our reach. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and dream. Hear us sing below, building the future is our legacy. Let us take a stand for our visions of hope, making future plans for the people to grow in a life filled with happiness and dream. Hear us sing below, building the future is our legacy. Building the future is our legacy.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is the presentation of Indonesia Raya, Simia Colors, and Simia Song. Now, I would like to invite the Director of Simia Kitab and Language, Dr. Luanik Mayani, to deliver welcoming remarks. To Dr. Luanik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Anissa. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good healthy morning to you all and warm welcome to the 11th Annual International Symposium of Foreign Language Learning, or AISOFOLL. Before I say a few words, let us praise and express our gratitude to the God Almighty for giving us blessing that we can gather today. I would also like to thank you all for attending this symposium. It's a great pleasure to have you all today. It's my privilege to announce that we have the Honorable Dr. Itra Agnes Pascua Valenzuela, the Director of Simeo Secretariat, distinguished keynote speakers, Associate Professor CHOO Shen Susan from National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technology University, Singapore, Mr. MORITA Mamoru from the Japan Foundation, Jakarta, Indonesia, Professor Dr. Didi Suherdi from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Bandung, Indonesia. Let me also greet our honorable partners, Mr. Xiao Xiangsong, the Director of Confucius Institute, Mr. Felipe Gronce, the linguistic attaché of Institut Français de Indonesia, Ms. Antje Nels, the head of Education Department of Goethe Institute, the representatives from Japan Foundation, Board of Directors and representatives of Simeo Centers Indonesia, distinguished boards of director of Simeo Kitabin Language, last but not least, to all 11 AISOFOLL presenters and participants. Please kindly accept our sincere gratitude. Dr. Itra, distinguished guests and participants, COVID-19 pandemic affects all aspects of human life, including it successfully changed the mode of the meeting of the 11 AISOFOLL from offline to fully virtual or online mode. However, we do believe that the virtual mode would not change the value of this symposium. It is an academic forum for teachers, experts, researchers, and partners, as well as stakeholders to share their research, good practices, ideas, or most recent issue in language education. I believe this is going to be an advantageous and productive symposium. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposed theme of the 11 AISOFOLL is Facing Industrial Revolution 4.0 through language education. This theme reminds us to the rapid growth of technology. This era is marked by some important inventions, such as Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and big data. Those inventions force humans to live in a borderless world, to be global citizens, to communicate real time using smart devices beyond time and space. In the education world, the Industrial Revolution 4.0 should be interpreted as a challenge to benefit teachers and students to maximize the use of technology for a better quality of education. Through this symposium, we do hope that participants can broaden their perspective in the use of technology in language learning, sharing new knowledge or information on methods or strategies used to make students to be ready to be a global citizens and worker of the fourth industrial revolution. Having better understanding on the utilization of artificial intelligence in language classes, as well as sharing good practices on teachers' role to support students' autonomous learning. In a broader sense, we do hope that the 11 AISOFOLL could enrich teachers' knowledge and prepare teachers, especially language teachers, to be a global, digital, creative, innovative, collaborative, communicative-minded teachers. Teachers who reflect the 21st century skills and aware of technology. Dr. Ito, distinguished guests and participants, please let me inform you that this virtual symposium will be held for 2 days, today and tomorrow, by presenting 4 keynote speakers in 2 plenary sessions and 19 presenters in 6 parallel sessions. This symposium is attended by 250 participants, not only from Indonesia, but also from the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Peru, Venezuela, Azerbaijan, United States of America, Colombia, Taiwan, Iran, Sri Lanka, and Saudi Arabia. Finally, I hope that Dr. Ito, the Director of Simeo Secretariat, could deliver an opening remark and officially open the 11th AISOFOLL of Simeo Kitab in language. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. Anik. Next, as our main agenda, may we invite Director of Simeo Secretariat, Dr. Ethel Agnes P. Valenzuela to deliver remarks and officially open the 11th AISOFOLL. Dr. Ethel, the floor is yours.
The Director of Simeo Kitep in Language, Dr. Luke Anik Mayani, to the distinguished speakers, Simeo Kitep in Language officials, friends, participants to the 11th Annual Symposium of Foreign Language Learning. A very pleasant good morning to all of you. I'm honored to give the opening remarks to this very important event as we are all in the pandemic and in lockdown. But the theme is very apt and appropriate, facing industrial revolution through language education. This event puts together the 19 language education practitioners and researchers from Southeast Asia as they present their research findings and good practices in language learning. It is heartwarming to know that Simeo Kitep in Language is not daunted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which we are all facing right now. Simeo Kitep in Language continued to support this annual symposium via online or virtual platform. In the coming days, the participants will be benefiting from the sharing of distinguished international experts focusing on foreign language teaching, e-learning materials development, technology options, and other blended learning modalities, which are new and appropriate approach for foreign language teaching, among others. But prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, technological advancements were made in the field of online learning and other alternative modalities. This is one silver lining that we can think of during the pandemic. It has rapidly accelerated the use of technology even during the lockdown. These were discussed during the Simeo Ministerial Policy Forum, which was hosted by Simeo in June 2020. The Ministers of Education of Southeast Asian member countries highlighted the efforts to continue to train teachers, develop their capacity, as well as develop the online modalities so that we can ensure that learning continues. I would also like to warmly welcome and congratulate all teachers who are joining this 11th AISOFOLL, which coincides with the celebration of World Teachers' Day. So the theme of this year's World Teachers' Day is Teachers Leading in Crisis, Reimagining the Future. The COVID-19 pandemic has intense pressure to teachers to be able to maximize the use of technology because the schools are closed and we need to build back better. So our speakers in this symposium will share recent researches, development efforts on how to ensure that children will keep on learning in different modalities in different platforms. Lastly, I would like to congratulate Simeo Kitep in Language for staging this annual symposium. The Southeast Asian region really needs to learn more about foreign language teaching and contributing to the discussions on global citizenship, to have more knowledge that are critical to the society where we live in, where we are more interconnected, especially during these unprecedented times. I'm confident that this day will give us more insights, and tomorrow we'll be learning more from the event to empower and enhance capacities of our language teachers to do their task by sharing from all the experts that were invited by Simeo Kitep in Language. Thank you very much once again, and a very good morning to all.
Thank you, Dr. Ethel. Ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda is photo session. May we request our keynote speakers, distinguished guests, and Board of Director of Simulcast and Language to put your best position for virtual photo session. Please be ready. Let me count. 1, 2, 3. May we take one more photo, please? 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will start with the plenary session 1. The agenda is presentation by Associate Professor Chu Zhangli Suzanne and Mr. MORITA Mamoru. To chair the session, we kindly invite Deputy Director for Program of Simulcast and Language, Ms. Esra Nelvi M. Siagian. To Ms. Esra, the floor is yours.
Still mute, Bu Esra.
Okay, thank you, Anissa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 11th Annual International Symposium of Foreign Language Learning. The theme is Facing Industrial Revolution 4.0 Through Language Education. Thank you for all of you for attending this symposium. It is our great pleasure to have you all today. My name is Esra Nelvi Siagian. I am the Deputy Director of Simulcast in Language, and I will be serving you as the moderator today. You will be hearing presentation from Associate Professor Cho Shen Lee Susan and Mr. MORITA Mamoru on these very timely subjects. Now, I will read the structure of this plenary session. The first presentation is from Associate Professor Chu Shen Lee Susan. The second presentation of paper is from Mr. MORITA Mamoru. The third session is question and answer. Every speakers have 20 minutes to present their paper and followed by question and answer session. When the presentation is running, if you have any questions, please type it in the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, let me read the curriculum vitae of our keynote speakers. The first keynote speaker is Associate Professor Chu Shen Lee Susan. She is Assistant Dean, degree at the Office of Teacher Education and Associate Professor in the English Language and Literature Academic Group at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. Her research has been published in various peer-reviewed journals, such as Harvard Educational Review, Critical Studies in Education, British Journal of Educational Studies, Research in Teaching of English, Curriculum Inquiry, Journal of Curriculum Studies, among others. Her book, Reading the World, the Globe, and the Cosmos, was awarded the 2014 Critics' Choice Book Award by the American Educational Studies Association. Her most recent book are co-edited volumes titled Educating for the 21st Century was published by Springer in 2017 and Education in the Asia Pacific was published by Raleigh in 2018. She is on the governing board of the Global Learning Alliance, a consortium of schools and universities from around the world. She is also Associate Editor for Asia Pacific Journal of Education. She is interested in issues related to educational for global and cosmopolitan citizenship, particularly in relation of English education. Professor Cho will present Teaching English in an Age Globalization, Developing Critical aesthetic, and ethical capabilities for the future. Please, Professor Cho, time is yours. Professor Cho, can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I was
Yes.
not able to unmute just now. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Good morning. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this wonderful symposium. And now I'm going to share my screen and begin my talk. Okay, so today my talk is titled Teaching English in an Age of Globalization, Developing Critical, Aesthetic, and Ethical Capabilities for the Future. Even though I'm going to be focusing on English language because that's what I teach in my university, I think what I'm going to share can apply to all other languages as well. Okay. So let me start with this point that as the theme of this conference is industrialization 4.0, we are living in this globally interconnected world. And I want to start by talking about 5 major trends that the world is facing right now. The first trend is global connectivity. As we all know, we live in this global village where we are connected to one another by technology, by social media. Scholars have called this the flat world, and that we are living in networked societies. The second trend is global mobility. So countries all over the world are facing this issue of immigration, refugees, asylum seekers. As Professor Alexander Betts from Oxford University says, refugees and displacement are likely to be the defining issue of the 21st century. The third major trend is the gap between rich and poor. Increasingly, the rich, the wealthy are making use of the poor. There are estimated 27 million slaves in the world, and not just people who are human trafficked, but also domestic slave labor as well. And then there's also the issue of extremism, terrorism. This is not just external threats, but they are part of our local experiences increasingly. Okay, societies have become transformed into what Ulrich Beck, who is a global studies scholar, calls world risk societies. And I want to come to the fifth trend. The fifth trend is xenophobia and intolerance. When COVID-19 occurred, we know that all over the world, there was a lot of anti-Asian racism all over. People, like the President of the United States talked about building walls to keep other people out. Now, what has this got to do with English language? I want to say that English language plays a very important role today. It is a global language that is widely used, but not just for communication. It is also a lingua franca, or what is called a bridge language. It helps to bridge people together. In politics, it is one of the official languages used in organizations like World Bank, United Nations, APEC, ASEAN. In terms of culture, English spread because of Britain, and then United States as global superpowers. And because of these countries, a lot of immigrants also started to learn the English language as a foreign language or second language. Now, in the area of economics, the 300 transnational, multinational organizations that control 25% of the world's assets and the world's wealth, among them, English is the main working language that is used. And finally, English users dominate the internet. Okay, the research in English language scholarly journals dominate the field. Okay, so I want to say that English is not just a language for communication, not just we shouldn't just focus on skills. We should think of language as a bridge to understanding others in the world. given that our world is so globally connected and given all the conflict and intolerance that's happening, we need to see language as a tool for reaching understanding, as the philosopher Habermas says. Another quote that I like is from the philosopher Levinas. Language provides a bridge between ourselves and the other. For the essence of language is friendship and hospitality. So I want to talk about a holistic language curriculum. What is a holistic language curriculum? I would say that there are three main dimensions. The first dimension is the critical, which means when we look at the text, we need to focus on what the text is saying, okay, what meaning it is being communicated. The aesthetics of the text looks at how the meaning is conveyed through the craft, through the style of the text. And finally, the most important to me is the ethical. The ethical is about looking at who the text portrays and how the text enables us to understand, empathize, and engage with others in the world. So let me talk about each of these domains. They each are connected to different skills. So in the critical domain, you see that there are understanding, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating skills. The aesthetic domain, we're talking about linguistic, sensory, sonic, and self. Okay, and ethical domain is about connecting to other texts, to the society, to the world around us, and to theories. I'm going to run through each of these in detail. So let me talk about the critical and aesthetic domains of language education. So in the critical domain, what are we looking at? Okay, so first we look at understanding a text. When we look at any text, we say, what is the main idea of the text? What are the key events or characters in the text, the most important lesson or conclusion? In the area of analysis, we look at what are the key ideas that support the text, who is the speakers and their attitude to the text, and then their characters in the text, and the writer's intention. In synthesizing, we look at how different parts of the text connect to each other. We compare the beginning of the text with the end of the text. We look at whether there's a development of ideas and how the text is structured or organized. And finally, we evaluate a text. Is it credible? Is it reliable? What race, gender, class, group is being talked about? Who is silenced? What values are reinforced in the text? Okay, so take a look at this advertisement. It's an advertisement about elephant extinction. How will you get students to analyze this text? We can apply the critical questions I mentioned just now. First, to understand the text. It's an advertisement on elephant extinction. We can analyze the text. For example, we can look at the mood of the text. Why is the mood very sad? What's the evidence? The evidence is that, you know, the color is very somber. It's the idea of the sun setting. Okay. We can look at different parts of the text. For example, there's only one tree, there's only one elephant, there's the sun setting, and all these, how does all these things connect? It contributes to a sense of death, of loss, because the elephant is dying, is becoming extinct. We can also evaluate this text. Do you think it's persuasive? We can say it is using emotions, but it doesn't provide any facts. It doesn't provide any statistics. So it's purely on emotion. So we evaluate the text on how effective it is. Now, besides critical engagement, we can also apply aesthetic engagement. Aesthetic engagement is where we look at the techniques that the writer uses. Also, typically there are different domains. Okay, the linguistic is looking at things like words and placement of words, punctuation. The sensory level is looking at things like imagery, figurative language, and the sonic level is looking at sound, rhythm, and rhyme. Okay, so students shouldn't just identify the technique. They need to explain why a technique is used and its effect. So let me apply it to this text again. The linguistic level, we can look at words and the placement of words. For example, if you look at the slogan, will only words remain? What is the technique here? It is a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question means you ask a question, but you don't, the answer is obvious. Basically, the writer is saying that only words will remain because we're not doing anything and elephants will become extinct. So that technique is called rhetorical question. We can look at whether there are any imagery or similes or metaphors. For example, here there is the metaphor of the elephant. The elephant is compared to a skeleton, which is the idea that it's becoming extinct and disappearing. We can also look at sound. There's the rhythm. The rhythm is very slow. Will only words remain? Right? It's very, very haunting. So the aesthetic engagement is looking at how the different techniques are used to convey a message. Now, aesthetic engagement also involves connecting to the self, right? So it's not just looking at techniques, but how can teachers use different types of pedagogies to make students involved in interpreting the text? So there are many strategies. I've listed a few here, like getting students to question a text, having debates, free writing, okay, intuitive feeling questions. Then there's imaginative types of responses through role play, hot seating, freeze frame, and then creative writing, multimodality, collage, and so on. These are some examples. Now, I want to go to the last part, which to me is the most significant. I talked about critical, I talked about aesthetic, and now I want to come to the most important, which is the ethical domain of language education. What is the ethical domain of language education? The ethical domain is in this blue part where we connect text to other texts, to society, to the world, and to theory. Okay, so let me offer a few strategies that you can apply in your classroom. The first is to question values in text. Every text has certain values and beliefs. Let me give some examples. Okay, first, when we are questioning values, we are asking 5 questions. Voice, who is speaking? Who does he or she represent? Perspective, who is telling the story? From whose perspective? Representation, how is this issue represented and what techniques are being used to make it believable? A bias is very good to observe, right? Is there any stereotypes in the text? And finally, values. What values does it promote? And do you agree with these values? So let me give another example. We all know this story called Ugly Duckling. Okay, Ugly Duckling, this picture book starts like that. There once was an ugly duckling with feathers all stubby and brown. And the other birds in so many words said, get out of town. Now, those of you who know Ugly Duckling, we know this brown bird later becomes a swan. And we know that the moral of the story is that everybody has beauty inside them. But if we look at the values and the bias in this story, we notice something. Why is the ugly duckling ugly? If you look at the first line, it is because the duckling is brown. So we can say that there's some kind of bias here. Those who are brown are regarded as ugly. Now, at the end of the story, the ugly duckling becomes a white swan. And he says, who is an ugly duckling? Not I, not I. So we can say there is a value system in this fairy tale. That is, beauty is equated with whiteness, being white and not brown, right? So there is a kind of racism in this text. If we are not careful, we can be teaching these stories without realizing that there is racism in the text. And therefore, we need to evaluate values in the text. Okay, second strategy is connecting to society and the world. And I want to give some examples of the teachers that I work with. First, we can, instead of teaching language around skills, often we teach grammar skills, we teach text types. But we can also organize our curriculum around global issues. These are the key global issues today, like immigration, climate change, global disease, slavery, terrorism. So let me just give an example of a teacher I saw, a language teacher who was teaching grade 7, which is 13-year-olds in a Singapore all-boys school. And she was teaching this very popular text called Animal Farm. Okay. Now she paired it with another book called Shooting Kabul, which is actually about the Taliban and a family fleeing the Taliban. They go to United States, and then the 9/11 happens. So one of the things she got them to do is to look at real-world global issues like 9/11. They conducted research on 9/11. They look at eyewitness accounts. And then they had to interview someone, write a story from the point of view of someone living in the United States who is Muslim or South Asian and who may be facing prejudice, like the protagonist in the story Shooting Kabul. And then in one project, they had to examine refugees and why they flee and run away. So you can see that this 10-week unit was organized around a key global issue, this idea of terrorism. In another unit, I observed, this is grade 8, which is like 14 years old. It was an English language class in a mainstream school. The teacher designed a 10-week unit around modern day slavery. A lot of our children don't know that there's slavery going on. And so the students actually were given this scenario. They were asked, you have $2,000 to plan a trip to anywhere in the world. So they planned an itinerary. Many of them said they wanted to go to America, to London, to UK. And then the teacher asked them, are there people who travel, who have no choice but to travel? And introduced them to a documentary about human trafficking. Individuals in Cambodia, Thailand, Laos who are victims of human trafficking. They read stories and poems about sweatshop laborers. And they did a creative assignment where they designed an anti-slavery poster. And then they wrote a speech that defended the rights of all these people in slavery. Okay, so this is an example of a 10-week unit, English language unit on slavery. My third strategy is we can also design our curriculum that connects to ethical issues, ethical theory like discrimination, injustice. So this is a project that I recently did with a group of teachers. We designed a unit around racism. Racism is a big issue all over the world. We had our unit divided into 4 parts. The 4 parts we asked, who is the other? So we look at advertisements and film and posters about who is being stereotyped, who experiences racism in our country. Then part 2 is how are they being stereotyped? How are they being discriminated against? They read articles on stereotyping and they looked at film posters and advertisements. Part 3 is where we look at the perspectives of the other. What do these minorities think? We read poems written by these minorities, exploring their experiences. And part 4 was a creative writing aspect where we got students to think about what does it mean for everybody to belong in a country? What does home represent? Okay, so these are some images that we got students to do at the beginning where they look at stereotypes of different races. So they looked at stereotypes of the Chinese, stereotypes of Malays, stereotypes of Indians in Singapore. Okay, and how other people stereotype others. So we discussed the effects of stereotyping. One of our very powerful projects that we got students to do is called the It's Not Okay Instagram project, where we gave them a template and they have to fill in the blanks. It's not okay to fill in the blanks. Instead, try this. So students wrote this on their own. And then we got other students to read it out. So some students say it's not okay to use racist slurs as a joke. Instead, try understanding what that is offensive to others. So it's very powerful because the class learned to listen to how their friends feel. They didn't realize that a lot of friends actually face racism. So this was a very powerful activity that you can try. Okay, and finally, my 4th strategy is encourage wide reading in your curriculum. Okay, another school I saw is that the teacher dedicates 15 minutes of class time every lesson for students to do independent reading. And he has books from around the world in his classroom. So I want to introduce to you that instead of using the very classical types of books, there's a lot of books on global issues like terrorism. These are some key books, young adult books that you can introduce your students. These are wonderful anthologies by Amnesty International on human rights. I just want to highlight literature from the axis of evil are stories from countries like North Korea, Cuba, Afghanistan, Syria, countries we will never go to, but it's important to include their voices in our classroom. Okay, there are a lot of literature on immigration issues. So if you feel like there are these issues, there's this tension in your town or city, perhaps get students to read about this through stories, which are very powerful. And finally, there's a lot of stories on young adult issues like bullying. Wonder is a story about bullying and how students feel when they are bullied. Sold is a wonderful book on human trafficking, also very powerful. Okay, so let me end off by saying that language education should empower students with critical, aesthetic, and ethical capabilities. Ultimately, our curriculum, pedagogy, and text must provide opportunities for students to explore global issues. We shouldn't just focus on teaching skills alone. We need to also think about how language can cultivate empathy, understanding of other people in the world. And in this way, we make the world more hospitable, more open, and more tolerant. So these are some resources. I published a book last year. I co-published Literature Education in the Asia Pacific. It has countries around Asia featured. And I also have 2 websites if you are interested to read about young adult literature or global issues. These are my websites and also my links to the units on Asia and race. Feel free to email me if you have further questions. I look forward to the dialogue later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor CHOO, for addressing this interesting topic. Talk about the global citizenship capacities, the holistic framework of teaching English that promotes critical, aesthetic, and ethical ways of engaging with text, and how the framework can be applied and designed in English teaching. Thank you, Professor CHOO. Before we go to the second presenter, I would like to invite the participants who want to ask some questions. Please write your question in the chat box. Please don't forget to write your name, to whom the question will be addressed, and please type your short, concise, and clear questions. Next turn is for the second speaker, Mr. MORITA Mamoru. He graduated from Kyorin University Graduate School, majoring in intercultural studies in global communication. His area of specialty is Japanese language education. Thus, his professional experience are related to it. He has been a Japanese language specialist of the Japan Foundation Egypt, Czech Republic, South Korea, the Philippines, and Indonesia. Mr. MORITA will present e-learning material development promoted by the Japan Foundation. Please, Mr. MORITA, time is yours.
Thank you for introduction. Good morning. My name is MORITA Mamoru from Japan Foundation, Jakarta. Yes, today I'd like to give you overview of online Japanese language teaching materials developed by Japan Foundation. So sharing. Can you see the slide? Okay, thank you. Yes, first I would like to briefly introduce the Japan Foundation. We developed programs in 3 different fields: art and cultural exchange, Japanese language education overseas, and Japanese studies and intellectual exchange. Focusing on Japanese language education, we work to create and enhance Japanese language education environments worldwide in order to give more people around the world opportunities to study Japanese. It is also coordinates with governments and educational institutions in a variety of countries and regions to provide effective support aimed at meeting local needs. So today I'd like to introduce e-learning material development promoted by Japan Foundation. We promote e-learning materials such as online Japanese courses and Japanese learning website and apps. In response to rapid changes in learning environments with the spread of information and communication technology, ICT, as well as diverse needs of learners, an online course for learning Japanese plus online communities for interacting with fellow learners from around the world. Hi, this is Minato online Japanese language learning platform that provides both people for learning and for meeting others. That learning management system, LMS, is provided by Japan Foundation. Please watch our short introductory video first. Sorry, it's problem. Okay. Just a moment. Okay. So thank you for watching the video. Introducing the video of some Minato, introducing the video of some Minato users. I want to study Japanese, but there's no school close by. I'm not available at set times because I'm too busy with work or home. I'm interested in Japanese, but I don't think there's anywhere to learn casually. Fortunately, a number of Minato registrants exceed 100,000 last year, and it's still increasing. For these and other such people, Minato provides an online Japanese course. Also, with Minato communities, you can interact with people of all ages, cultures, and differing backgrounds on topics all react to Japan. In addition, there is an introduction to Japanese language training sites and apps provided Japan Foundation. Minato has two courses. One is a self-study course, and the other is tutor support course. The former is a course where learners can study at their own pace whenever they want to learn, and the later is live lessons are taken on a regular basis, and the tutor corrects the assignments submitted by learners. Therefore, the study period is decided in advance. There are various courses in Minato. Here are some typical courses. Hiragana course and Katakana course for learning Japanese basic characters. Each takes 14 hours, but early learner will finish sooner. Marugoto is a comprehensive teaching material for learning Japanese. It is divided into 6 stages from A1 to A2. Case Yomyom is a reading comprehension. Kansai dialect is one of the typical Japanese dialect, Kansai Ben, and Japanese in anime and manga is a fun course to greet and introduce yourself as an anime character. There are also some cultural courses: calligraphy, flower arrangement, haiku. Haiku is a short poetry in Japan, and hirogaru, get more Japanese and Japan. The level indications A1, A2, and B1 are based on the JF standard for Japanese language education. These levels are the same as those used in the CFR, Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, Learning, Teaching, Assessment. So it is possible to understand learners' Japanese proficiency using levels that are common with those used for other languages. This is Minato screen. Here, learners will find the name of courses and the language used to instruct it. This course is a self-study course, so learners can start studying but at any time. It is written about attendance period, study category, and course fee. For self-study courses, all tuition is free of charge. Upon completion of the online course, learners will get such a digital certificate by PDF format, like this. Now, let me show you partially about the contents of Hiragana course. Hi. To study Minato course, each learner must first register as a user, then choose the course learners want to study. This is my page. When learners open the page, they will see the list of selected courses. They will study in order from the first along the course. So I chose Hiragana course. This is one of the contents. Here they will learn vowels. Okay. Okay. Next, first check where the vowels are here. Next, they can listen repeatedly.
A, I, U, E, O, E, U.
Next, here they connect letters and pictures to promote memory. It is associated pictures, letters, and sounds.
I, U, E, O, E.
Next. Next is character matching quiz. A, E. If not combined correctly, it will be repelled like this. Okay. Next, check if they can remember by connecting the voice and the letter.
O, O, O.
Okay. In this way, they will continue learning. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, face-to-face lessons have been unavailable in many countries, and online lessons have been replaced. Minato can be studied by self-study, but can also be used as a part of high school, university, or other educational lesson. One thing to keep in mind when incorporating online courses such as Minato into classes is to make it clear that they are synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is what is done live like this symposium, and asynchronous is to watch pre-recorded videos at any time learners like. This is very important for planning the lesson. Back to the PPT. Okay. Okay, here are two examples. So first example, teaching materials use Minato Hiragana course and Katakana course. Learners should study Hiragana course and Katakana course in advance before the live lesson begins. Teacher can also instruct the learners to submit a PDF certificate by live lesson. In live lesson, teacher should do what only live lesson can do. This is a very important point. What do you think teacher should do? For example, write learner's name, living place, school name, and listen to the names of famous cities, and disease, etc. After finishing the live lesson, learners will enter the LMS by themselves and take a confirmation quiz to review. Some learners cannot connect to Minato because of internet problem. I recommend them to use the app. Only they download the app, they can use it even online. It is very convenient. Of course, these apps also complete free of charge. These apps are made by Japan Foundation. Okay, second example, I will introduce a Japanese class using Hirogaru. Hirogaru means expand in English. Hirogaru Get More of Japan and Japanese is a site for learning different things about Japan and the Japanese language through your own interests. There are 12 topics in this course. So star or night sky, outdoor, martial art, tea or cafe, sweets, supermarket or market, shodo, anime or manga, book or library, temple or shrine, music, and aquarium. So now let me show you partially about the contents of Hirogaru course. Hirogaru course. Okay. First, please watch a video related to the topic. This topic is about green tea. The first video you watch has no subtitle. Please get a rough idea of what the video is about.
やっぱり日本茶はやっぱり緑茶と言われるように鮮やかな緑になりますね。でその緑に合わせてあと日本茶特有の香りと味もやっぱり大きな魅力ですね。
Hi, next. watch the same video with subtitles. Here, the question are asked, what is the appeal of Japanese tea? And what's the point of keep in mind when brewing Japanese tea?
やっぱり日本茶はやっぱり緑茶と言われるように鮮やかな緑になりますね。でその緑に合わせてあと日本茶特有の香りと味もやっぱり大きな魅力ですね。煎茶と和菓子のセットも人気ございます。
和菓子はどういった和菓子ですか？
はい、季節の和菓子をご用意しておりましてお客様に選んでいただきます。
じゃあそれを一つお願いします。
はい、かしこまりました。少々お待ちくださいませ。お煎茶の入れ方もコツが何点かありましてそれを上手にすると美味しく入れられます。一つはお茶っ葉の量、次にお湯の量で、あとはお湯の温度ですね。熱いお湯を入れすぎるとちょっと味が苦くなるのでちょっと適温に冷ましたぐらいのお湯の温度とかがおすすめになります。ました。失礼いたします。ごゆっくりどうぞ。
Okay, continue to the quiz of content. In each topic, there are several questions. You may check what you have learned. These questions are for you to confirm your understanding and you will not affect your completion of this course. Before the live lesson starts, learners will select a favorite topic from Hirogaru and study it. Introductory videos, interviews, articles, etc. are included in each topic. The teacher can instruct learners to see them. Okay. In live lessons, teacher should do one only live lesson can do. What do you think teacher should do? For example, learners make groups for each topic they choose as breakout session in Zoom, and they prepare for the presentation. Or teachers can invite native Japanese speakers as guests and invite them to the breakout room to interview them on each topic. Of course, it's a topic of student choice, so students will be active after they do their presentation and ask questions from other group members. In addition, in this section, I have introduced two examples of Japanese class using Minato. Okay. Finally, I would like to summarize my presentation. First, distinguish between synchronous and asynchronous lessons. Teachers need to decide in advance what the learner will study before the live lesson begins. Second, use of online teaching materials. Teachers should frequently check information on online materials. Of course, many excellent online teaching materials have been developed besides Japan Foundation. Teachers must be informed about online materials on a regular basis and think carefully about how to use material in their lessons. Third, teachers' role in online lessons. What should teachers do to support learners' self-study? When learners study in a self-study course, sometimes they encounter something that they don't understand. In such a case, it is necessary to create a system that allows learners can easily ask questions to the teacher. Fourth, training of teachers who can teach online. From now on, it would be better to add online teaching methods to the training course of foreign language teachers. Fifth, securing human resources to facilitate online classes. And it is necessary to have specialists in the school who are familiar with online lessons. It is important for schools to have a system in place to help teachers in the event of problems with online lessons. That's it. Thank you for attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morita Mamoru, which already explained about Minato, an online Japanese language course. We still have 15 minutes. Okay, now let's go to the next session, question and answer session. We've got a lot of questions in the chat box. However, due to the limited time, I only present a few questions. We will display your question on the screen, and I will read the question before the keynote speaker answer it. First question from Dr. Luani Mayani. This question to Prof. CHOO. Could you share with us, if any, changes of students' behavior after they learned the global issues in your classroom? Please, Professor CHOO.
Thank you. This is a very important question, right? Because we hope to improve students' behavior. So one of the this was part of a research that was over 3 years. And so after the teachers implemented the unit that was on racism, we realized that students started to be more open to one another, meaning that they openly shared their feelings and their thoughts about a prejudice and things that they were not comfortable. Like a lot of them, some of them said they're not comfortable when their friends make jokes about their skin color or make jokes about the food that they eat because they found it racist. So I think it opened, it made the classroom more understanding. So I want to say that what is the global issues curriculum about? Okay, the main thing is about empathy. Yes, we also want to teach language skills. We want to teach grammar. We want to teach listening, comprehension, and everything. But we also want to develop empathy. Empathy for one another and empathy for other people in the world. And I think that is the purpose of a global issues curriculum.
Okay, thank you, Professor CHOO.
Okay.
The next question, also for Professor CHOO. There's a long question, I think, and many questions here. Is this concept of holistic language curriculum you presented already mainstream in the pre-service training of undergraduate English language education students in Singapore? To what extent this has been integrated in the lesson plans of school teachers in delivering their English language subject to their students? At what education level this approach should be appropriate introduced to get the best result from the students? This is from Pak Jess from Siameo Rekfon.
Okay, another very good question. I want to say that in Singapore, we have since 2010 have this model called 21st Century Competencies Model. One important part of the model is called global awareness. So all teachers, whatever subject you are teaching, whether it's English, science, or math, you must think of a way to make your students globally aware. This means that you must introduce global issues in your classroom. So for English language teachers have already been doing this. The current syllabus, which is the 2020 English language syllabus for primary and secondary schools, have a very strong emphasis on empathy. For example, under listening skills, it's not about teaching students to listen, but it's about teaching students to listen in order to empathize with other people. It's what we call empathetic listening. It's an important skill, not just listening, but learning to understand where the speaker is coming from. This is called empathetic listening. So I would say that we have been teaching this and emphasizing global awareness and empathy for many years, and I think but many teachers still focus on the skills, and we are slowly building resources to encourage this.
Okay, thank you, Professor CHOO. I think the next questions. Okay, still for Professor CHOO. Is it possible that ways of teaching that you have already applied then be conducted in a reading class, but the topic is not about the global issues? This is from Mr. Abdul Rashid.
Okay, thanks. I think if you remember okay, I have a very simple acronym for everyone to remember. It's called FACE. Okay, FACE. FACE means functional, aesthetic, critical, and ethical. Okay, this is the 4 paradigms of what I call holistic language learning: functional, aesthetic, critical, and ethical. This can be applied to any class. It doesn't have to be global issues. Anytime that students are reading a book, the functional means you look at the grammar, you look at the English skills, you look at the language skills. The aesthetic means that you look at the techniques that the writer is using. Okay, the critical means you analyze the text. And the ethical means that you think about what the text is saying about other people in the world. So you can apply this to any text. It does not have to be about global issues.
Okay, thank you, Professor CHOO. The next questions. Okay, still to Professor CHOO. This is from Ibu Ika Puspitarini. Your strategies in teaching reading are very interesting. I'm interested to apply them in my class, but I'm a little bit worried because my student English level proficiency is low. They always complain about the vocabulary that makes them not being able to understand the text. Could you give me some suggestion how to deal with it based on your experiences?
Okay, a lot of teachers I work with are at secondary school level, but a lot of the techniques can be applied to primary level and as well as students with low proficiency in language. Okay, so I give you 2 strategies. One is the issues that you are introducing should be something that students are interested in. Okay, it should be something that they know a little bit about and that they are aware of. So global issues and current issues are very good because it's always in the news. Like, for example, you can design a whole unit around coronavirus and how people and the racism that emerges around this. Okay, because students already have been reading it. So choose a topic that students know about and are interested in. Number 2, your text, the text that you choose should be suitable to their level. So for low proficiency learners, I would encourage you to use picture books. Okay, picture books are basically books that have images with them, because if students find the vocabulary difficult, the images can actually help them. And they can apply the same skills to reading images. Like the FACE, I told you, functional, aesthetic, critical, ethical, can also be applied to multimodal text. You can also apply it to reading visual text and not just linguistic text, right? So I would choose text that students can read, that the vocabulary level is accessible to students.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Professor CHOO. Okay, we still have another question, I think. Next question is for Mr. MORITA Mamoru. I'm interested to know strategies implemented by Japan Foundation to decide or to choose strong cultural contents for Japanese language learning. This is from Ibu Lu Ani Mayani. Please, Mr. MORITA.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, so I'm not sure what do you mean the strong cultural contents?
Okay.
So
we have Ibu Luhani Mayani here. Please, Ibu Luhani Mayani, maybe you can explain more.
Thank you, Ibu Esra. So, from your presentation, one of your example is about tea. You know, tea is a very strong culture in Japan. So I want to know, because we also develop learning materials for, Bahasa Indonesia for foreign learners. So we want to know your strategies, to choose which content, symbolize this strong culture for Japan in your case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So actually, in Hirogaru, there are 12 contents. So these contents are selected by Japanese learners. So Japan Foundation asked to Japanese learners all over the world, what Japanese culture do you want to study? So it is we get those many cultures items that we choose the most popular 12 things. So as you know, Japanese tea is one of the best selected culture from Japanese learners.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morita. Japanese tea is very popular in the world, Mr. Morita, yeah?
Yeah, I think so, too.
Yeah. Okay, everyone want to try about the Japanese tea, I think, okay? Okay, and maybe one day I can try that with Mr. Morita Momoru in Japanese Foundation. Okay, just kidding. Okay, next question from Mr. Abdul. Okay, next question, Itra. This is the same question. Yeah. Okay, this is from Mr. Ari from Tangerang to Professor CHOO. Exploring global issues and developing empathy are just ideas, but due to the students' background, bringing the sensitive issues may invite our students' opposition. What are the tips to clear up these problems?
Okay, thank you. Very good question. I think Indonesia is like Singapore. There are certain topics that our teachers are not comfortable with. Okay, like for example, gender and religion. These are topics that we will not discuss in the classroom in Singapore, okay, because they are considered very sensitive. But issues such as racism, discrimination, climate change, all these are global issues that I think you can bring up. Now, racism can sometimes be sensitive, but I think it is very important for the teacher to emphasize multiple perspectives. The point is not to have one perspective, but to listen to other students, to have multiple perspectives, and to be able to empathize with what other people, especially minorities, are feeling. Okay. The other thing I would say is your pedagogy. That is, you must encourage what I call dialogic pedagogies, things like debates, things like a discussion, Socratic circle, literature circles, role playing. These are very powerful strategies that let students talk and discuss so that it doesn't become teacher-centered. Okay, and I think things like debate, all that will also help students understand that there are multiple perspectives. Right, this is one way of getting around this idea of sensitivity. Right, the minute students realize if it's a sensitive issue, I think it's important we discuss it, but they must be aware there are multiple issues, there are multiple angles and perspectives to it.
Okay, thank you, Professor CHOO. We still have time. Okay, next question from Ibu Kairunisa. Also, this is from Tangerang to Professor CHOO. If we design about the current issue or global issue like capitalism, immigration, etc. in our teaching, I'm a bit afraid it will lead some misconceptions. Do you have a parameter to design it So as a teacher, I'm not blamed to teach critical reading to the students since the material could be breaking the law.
Okay, that's also a very good question. This is also a very common concern with teachers in Singapore. My advice is always start with talking about the issue somewhere else before you talk about your country. For example, let's talk about racism. I don't have to start with racism in my own country first. I can talk about racism, say, in United States. You know, there's the whole Black Lives Matter movement. That's a very big thing now in the US. I can talk about racism happening in another place. Then I get students to think about, for example, how do people feel when they are being discriminated? How do people feel when there's injustice? Okay, so we talk about other places. Then after that, I bring it to my country. I say, now let's think about Singapore or your own country. Okay, where do you see similar things happening? And how do you think people might feel when they experience this? Right. So in order not to get into trouble, you can always talk about other places first, and then bring it to your country. When you talk about your country, I think it's very important for the teacher to be neutral, that you are not a politician in the classroom. You cannot have an agenda. You must be a facilitator that allows students to see multiple perspectives to an issue and not try to promote a particular agenda. Okay, so that's how I would suggest.
Okay, one more question. Yeah. Please, okay, from Arif Hussein Lubis, this is also the last question, Professor Cho, yeah? How to balance culture learning in English learning in a critical way based on your perspective and experience? I was ever teaching critical thinking through critical reading and discussion. They have the ideas what to criticize the global issues, but they mostly use Indonesian.
Okay, I talk about the use of another language first. I did a project with immigrant students in the United States because I studied there for 4 years. So one of the projects we did was called this bilingual project, okay, where students wrote their short stories in their own language. Like, for example, they will write it in Indonesian, some of them will write it in Chinese. But we got them to then translate it into English. And that's how we taught them English. Okay, these were very low proficiency learners. So don't always, if they're not comfortable with their mother tongue, the English language, you know, you can always let them talk about it in their own language, but ask them, think of how you will translate it into English. What words will you use? Okay, the other thing I want to say is that critical thinking does not need to be separate from cultural thinking. And that is, we are always, when we apply critical thinking, like I showed you just now, analyzing, synthesizing, evaluating, these are key critical thinking skills. We can apply it to any kind of cultural text. When we are looking at a text, like a film, a video, we can apply analysis, synthesis, evaluation. So we shouldn't see these two as separate. Yeah, we should integrate critical and cultural thinking in our classroom. We should encourage students to engage in a diversity of cultures in our classroom. I think the example I showed you just now was that we had one teacher, every 15 minutes of class, he has independent reading, silent reading. And he encourages students to read text from around the world. They can choose whatever text. He doesn't tell them which text to read. He lets them choose the text they're interested in, but he encourages them to read text from different countries. Okay, so in this way, I would say this will expose your students to global issues in a more interesting way.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Cho. Thank you so much, Mr. Morita.
Very interesting questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, I think the time is up. I don't need to make a conclusion. I think all of us listen already to extraordinary presentation. Please conclude each. Hopefully the presentation will give benefit for us. Siamio Kitab in Language would say thank you to our great presenters and all of the participants for active participation. Thank you for attention. See you then.
See you. See
Thank you, Professor
Thank
Cho,
you.
Mr. Morita. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Esra.
Thank you
Thank
very
you. Keep in
much.
touch.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will take my leave now. Bye-bye.
Yes,
See you.
thank you.
Esra, thank you for
Thank
Ms.
you.
Associate Professor Chuzenli Suzanne and Mr. Morita Mamoru. Thank you for your sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now heading to parallel session. The committee will prepare 3 parallel rooms and help participants to enter the selected room. Please click join when there is a notification to join the parallel room. We will start the session in 15 minutes. Thank you for your kind attention.